to kick things off, three things we learned. I'm going to talk about the main thing I learned from the weekend is that Gabriel is probably the centre-back that Arsenal have been looking for. I mean, it seemed like every Premier League team was in for him in the summer, right? From Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea, and he looks like a bit of a bargain. He had one miscommunication within the first 5 minutes of his debut, which, he's speaking Portuguese, you've got a German goalkeeper, Spanish right back, English, Scottish guys, Kieran Tierney playing left back. So could probably excuse him for that, considering he's been in the country for a grand total of about 6 days. But everything else was great. Scored a goal, decent header. But apart from that, he was so commanding, in his own box, in the other box he caused problems. But on the ball, the way that Arsenal want to play under Arteta, on his left peg, he could just get the ball down, spray it into the midfield, was comfortable dropping back and then playing out. And we've seen under Arteta that Arsenal aren't scared to do that. And I learned that Gabriel is pretty much the real deal. Again, this is week one, so I don't want to put us out there too much. But that's my main takeaway from being at Craven Cottage. And then also seeing, when you see a player up close and personal sometimes, it makes a difference than perhaps if you see him on TV. So it was really nice to see that. And the intangibles, he was getting a lot of encouragement from the coaching staff who were set up in the stands near me and the backroom staff at Arsenal. And when he scored, the Arsenal players were delighted and celebrated with him massively. So you could tell it was a big deal for him to have a good start. And I think Arsenal now have been searching for that centre-back for so many years, haven't they? So I think they finally have him. But Nick Mendola, what did you learn from the opening weekend of the Premier League season, sir?
So I'm sticking with the same position as you, Joe. And something I saw was, listen, I don't think anybody doubts that Liverpool's still going to be an extremely good team, a title contender. They're the reigning champs for a reason. But I worry that they're doing a little bit of a Man City. Obviously, still time left in the transfer market. But last year with City, we kind of knew all summer long, man, they're in trouble if a center back gets hurt. They're in trouble if a guy gets hurt. And sure enough, Laporte got hurt, and there's no one there. This isn't even an injury thing with Liverpool, which is my concern, because the margins are going to be so fine this year. Last year, let's face it, you look up and down the top four, the top six, and so many teams were down, and it was kind of remarkable in that way. And you expect that Chelsea got better. You hope, Andy, that Tottenham will be better. Arsenal, just name a team. Manchester United, the way they finished the season, if they brought any of that form all the way through the year, how much closer are they to the top? And I'm a numbers nerd. I love the expected goals. Liverpool outperformed that last year. Are we really thinking that there's not going to be a dip in form for Joe Gomez? Is Klopp going to need his own Fernandinho? So that's my concern. I know there's talk about Omar Colley from Sampdoria, who's been linked with a bunch of other teams. It's I think, Joe, you wrote about it today. So for me, that's the concern. It's not, is Liverpool going to be good? Can they contend for the Champions League? It's, are they, while crying about money a little bit now, which I think was a little bit off-putting for those of us who remember them spending $250, $300 million over 2 summers, and Van Dijk, right? Are they overlooking center back?
So what you're saying is that Liverpool were lucky last season?
Completely lucky. Totally. Probably the worst title I've ever seen, and their supporters never get angry or bitter, so I'm sure they'll take this all with a grain of salt.
But I think that, it's interesting because how do you improve one of the greatest teams in Premier League history, right? Do you rip up or do you have to be ruthless? And I think Sir Alex Ferguson was always so great with Man United, the great teams, being pretty ruthless at the time, it would seem. But then the next season they win the league again, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that's why he moved on, so-and-so, that's why he did that. But, pretty interesting take there, Nick. Andy, what did you learn the opening weekend?
Real quick, though, fun fact, Nick mentioned Omar Colley there. Formerly, about 10 years ago, on trial with Sporting Kansas City here in MLS. So the traditional career path of coming over from Africa, going on trial in Kansas City, not signing, by the way, heading off to, I think, kind of an outpost in Eastern Europe, getting the chance into Serie A, and now being linked with Liverpool, as you said, one of the greatest Premier League teams of all time. So, that's just how it works in this world. But anyway, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. This isn't something that I so much, necessarily learned over the weekend as much as I kind of had it reinforced to me based off of what we saw from 38 games last year. I think Frank Lampard is a pretty good manager already, and I think he might be very, very good. Like maybe not a legend, but one of the very best in the world for a time at some point in his career. Given kind of how little experience he had before taking a job the size of Chelsea, I'm a little bit surprised at what he has done thus far. I think the transfer ban in season 1 was simultaneously an incredible challenge, but maybe also a little bit of a gift for him as well. It gave him a little bit of time to kind of establish himself within that team and everything. He seemed to take it in stride, and then they brought in, or he brought through kind of 4 or 5 important first team players in that first season that maybe otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to play for this team. But now it's a completely different challenge, to build on what he did last year, throw in $250 million worth of new players into the mix this season with a squad, by the way, that's already very well established and already finished 4th last season. So they've done something. So that's a difficult challenge. And I know there's 37 games to go still this season, but the win over Brighton on Monday, I think, was very, very impressive for me. They get the goal early. They give up an equalizer not long after halftime, but then they hit right back. They seemed completely unfazed by being hit away from home, and then they go and get another and put the game away and finish it off. And so it just leaves me wondering, what about Frank Lampard is it that is so good? And I think tactically he's pretty okay. I think he's got a couple blind spots, and those are things that he'll have to work on. I think over the course of his career and everything, we'll see how he does with kind of talent identification and assessment and fitting new players into the team. That's the challenge this season. But it always comes down to motivation, and I don't really like that word in this instance. I like the word inspiration for Frank Lampard and his team, because it's about what I think he makes his players feel when he has something to say to them. When he steps up to talk, he has always struck me, and Joe, I know you could speak to this, having spoken to him in press conferences and everything, but he's always struck me as a very smart and thoughtful person. He puts thought into everything that he says, but then you also have to be able to relate to your players and how do they view you on a human level. And I think for him, given that there's 8 English-born players in that Chelsea first team, that he would have been a hero for 6 or 7 of them throughout his entire playing career. And so the chance to work with him is just something completely different for those players, and commands a bit of respect for him while being very, very clever and very, very well prepared for the job that I think can take him to another level. Being a good player doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager, but when you do tick all those other boxes, it is that little bit more that it adds to you that just kind of puts you over the top anyone else. And I could see him having a very, very long career there at Chelsea based on what we've seen from one season and one game. I don't want to rush too much, but I've just been very, very impressed by everything he's done, everything that he's said, just the way that he carries himself and goes about the job.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Frank Lampard gets a lot of flack maybe for the amount of money Chelsea have just gone out and spent, but when you actually look at it, that money in that transfer pot has been building up over the last 2 seasons pretty much with the transfer ban. And now it's almost like, okay, we had all these deals lined up. Let's do it all at once while the transfer market is relatively low, so we can go and get Timo Werner, Ziyech, Havertz. We can go and get Ben Chilwell. Yes, it seems like a lot of money in an outlay, but for the last 2-3 transfer windows, we spent next to nothing. I want to add one more point on Chelsea. They were missing a bunch of players as well. Let's not forget. The Pennsylvania Messi, Christian Pulisic was out. Ziyech is injured. Ben Chilwell is injured. Kovacic was out. They should have a new, Thiago Silva wasn't ready to play yet. So half that team is probably going to be different in a few weeks' time, and probably upgrades in every position as well. So, not bad 3-1 win when you've got half the team out there. So, Nick,
Joe,
final,
looked like
final thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it looked like, Loftus-Cheek up top, right? And he wasn't exactly phenomenal. Andy, what struck me when you were talking is, just to throw another name out there, he's not Spanish, but he would have captured Real Madrid imaginations of that youth group, is Zidane. Right. So he looms larger, comes into the team, maybe with a questionable experience, but obviously great soccer knowledge. So I like that. And I especially like it because, Joe, I think you and I have spoken about this before. I wouldn't be surprised if Brighton outperforms expectations this year. I really like what Graham Potter's doing. So that win meant something to me as well.
Definitely. Okay. So there's 3 things we learned from the Premier League and week 1 of the season.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe. Make sure you subscribe to watch highlights all season long, and always join us every weekend at 7 a.m. on NBCSN for Premier League mornings. Plus, make sure you subscribe to Peacock Premium as well, where you can watch exclusively live 175 games and same-day on-demand replays of all 380 Premier League matches as well.